Hi everyone, very happy to be here today. We're going to tell you a few things about automotive industry and the modern attack surfaces on it. But first, let me introduce Lior. Lior is a wonderful partner of mine. We both work at Automotive Industries in Israel. It's a small startup based in Tel Aviv, and we do automotive cybersecurity. Lior here, by my side, is an amazing person. He is a robotics geek. He is studying German on his free time because we have a lot of German clients, and he likes doing things all the way. And also a secure development consultant, if you happen to ever need that.
Okay, I want to thank Yonatan for presenting me. Yonatan is a great guy. He likes to do bug bounties on his free time. He's doing acro yoga, so he's an acro yogist, and if you wonder what it is, search it up. It's pretty impressive. And he's also moving to Italy next week. So he came all the way here and never going back to Israel. Well, at least until next year, we guess. We both work for Automotive Technologies. Automotive Technologies is a startup co-founded with Volkswagen, based in Israel. We develop security solutions for the automotive industry, and provide managed services. We are both part of the penetration testing team. We do vehicle security research and passing ECU protections. Basically, we find vulnerabilities in car computers and we hack them for the vehicle suppliers to be able to fix such vulnerabilities. The other part of the company, which is the R&D section, is doing development for security solutions. So from the findings that we find in the PT team, we come up with ideas of how we can better protect vehicles around the world. And they take that, implement that, and hopefully we will be the first automotive security company to embed IDS and solutions inside the car. When I say hopefully, it's going to happen pretty soon, and we're going to be the first. And we have other solutions like Automotive SOC and more.
Yeah, so with that, just a little disclaimer before we continue. Unfortunately, most of the impressive things that we find are protected by non-disclosure agreements. And as such, we can tell you, but then we'll have to kill you. So that's not going to happen today. What is going to happen today is a lot of ideas and a lot of thoughts that we have and some progress that we see in the industry to kind of tickle your minds a little bit so you can understand what's going on with your cars and why do they need cybersecurity. So with that, okay, you know who we are, and this is the agenda for today. Let's get started. Okay. So if you've not been living in a bubble in the past few years, then you probably know that there are 2, maybe 3 main trends that are currently happening in the automotive world. The first one is connecting cars to things. Okay, so we have this concept of a connected car. This is a direct continuation to connecting all other things in our lives to the internet and to things around them. So you have refrigerators communicating and you have cars communicating. The other main trend is autonomous cars. So by leveraging multiple technologies that have recently ripened and became available on the market, the industry aims to have cars that are self-driving. Now, this is obviously quite a hard task to do, and it's going to take a few years, and there are a few steps to take before your car can drive itself completely on its own. So we have progress and we have assisted driving in the middle, but eventually this is going to be a big thing. And here you can see a bunch of protocols or technologies that are involved in this process, and you can see that they correspond. And these 2 trends did not have to happen at the same time. It just happens to be so that the technologies relevant for these 2 things became available around the same time, which is about now. And we can expect to see in the not so far future connected autonomous cars or autonomous connected cars, which is kind of the idea that you have from sci-fi movies of a car that can connect to everything around it and is also driving on its own. It's very futuristic and impressive. Okay, now who talks to my car? If we go back pretty much 15 years ago to the year 2015, there was not much in terms of advanced technology as we know it today. So the luckier of us probably had the Nokia smartphones that had the resistive touchscreens that you had to press really hard. iPhone was not invented yet. This whole revolution of having a full-featured device in your pocket did not exist. And maybe you probably had an iPod. So the car, mainly for your entertainment, maybe the more expensive cars had auxiliary connections to be able to play some music. And if you were lucky, you would also have a USB connection to have your MP3 songs played somehow. And this was pretty much it, around 15 years ago. Now, if we hop 10 years into the future to around the year 2015, now this entertainment had enlarged, and the car manufacturers realized that in order to satisfy us, the Y generation, the techies that were born almost with phones in our hands, they need to advance a little bit into the future. And so they start embedding technologies that at this point existed in probably all of the mobile phones into the car. Now, this is much more fun for the driver because you have a larger screen and it's a part of your system, but it's still not majorly different from just placing your phone on the windshield and driving with your navigation system, for example, on. And if we look a little bit more into the future, into probably the year 2025, then we can expect many more connectivity options and external inputs that our cars are going to have to process and act accordingly. Now, here are just a few examples. Probably most of these three-letter abbreviations are Chinese to you. Maybe you don't even know what they mean. They are kind of odd to most people, but we will get into some of them in the next slides. Now, what does this imply? So the first thing that you have to understand is that car companies are giants. These are huge companies that were built entirely around processes for creating cars. Now, originally, they were usually companies of mechanical engineers, which created either completely mechanical devices or semi-electronic devices. And when I say that, I mean devices that are comparable to an Arduino that you can buy on the internet. They have some inputs and outputs, but they don't really have any operating system or advanced multitasking or process management capabilities, and they can receive basic inputs and process them and act accordingly. And these things usually communicated between them in about a 20-year-old technology named CAN bus. CAN bus, there's not much to know about it. You should know that it's old, that it's very fast in terms of response times, but it does not allow you to deliver so much information, and that it has zero attention to security when it was designed. So it's really hard to secure such old technologies. Now, when we're going to the future, the demand for fast speeds is growing, and so the communicating devices of the future have to leverage the new Ethernet protocol that is now over 30 years old. But obviously, the car industry is way behind the other industries. And also, these mechanical or semi-electronic devices have transitioned into full-fledged Linux systems that are very much alike the systems that you know and love or hate from the IT industry. And the third thing that happened is that these car manufacturers, giants, had to transition from being companies of only mechanical engineers into companies who also have software developers. And this is a big thing for them. Now, this change also created new demands. For once, there is the connectivity issue and centralized management issue that we will speak about more later in this discussion. And there are growing IT departments that no longer are responsible only for managing the office network or the production network like they used to, but there are actually now IT experts like the old school IT and networking experts that have to deal with things that are put into the car, because we're thinking about Linux systems and Ethernet connections, and that's being put into cars. And the third thing, which is really nice for us because it pays the bills, is just a whole lot of more information security business around the car industry. And we're not the only company that does this, not even in Israel. And the most beautiful thing is that cars are now much more hackable than they were ever before in the past. Okay, so let's have some terminology. I spoke about manufacturers. These are really usually referred to as OEMs. And here are just 4 examples out of the probably over 100 OEMs that exist in the world. We have ECUs, electronic control units, which basically what you should know about them is that they are car computers. In a modern car, there are over 100 ECUs. So if you even try to imagine how many components build your car, then you can understand that almost everything nowadays is controlled or assisted by some ECU. Some of them smarter than others, but still very much electronified. Okay? And the last thing that you should know is infotainment, which is kind of a weird word. It's a mix of information and entertainment, and this is essentially a nickname for the multimedia system that you see in every car nowadays. Okay, so you know a little bit about the automotive past and the future. Now let's start talking about some fun stuff. A new fashion in the vehicle industry are IoT devices. So you've all heard of IoT, Internet of Things. I mentioned it as connecting things to the internet. And this is actually already not such a new trend. It's been around for probably around 5 years. But the car manufacturers 5 years ago, because of them being such giants with slow processes, were not ready to have IoT solutions, connected car solutions back then. But companies who were ready were smaller companies, maybe startups, that don't really have to comply with the huge, massive regulation and processes that have to go through when you want to do something as a car manufacturer, and they could already supply solutions to the market. Now, here are 2 examples of such solutions. On the left, you can see OBD dongles. OBD is the onboard diagnostics, which is essentially a technician port. I had mentioned CAN bus before. OBD is perhaps the only external CAN bus connector in the car. So when you take your car to the garage, you can see that the technician in the garage brings his computer along and connects a cable between the computer and the OBD port. And that can be used to query the internal ECUs and to gain information about what was happening in the car. And about, I guess, 5 years ago, companies realized that why should only technicians be able to do this, right? And we can create OBD dongles that connect via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or even sometimes cellular networking. And then the customer, the user, can have an app on his phone and able to extract the messages, understand the messages, and perhaps identify problems in the car without even being able to see them physically or without the need to go to the garage. So there are a lot of examples for these. And on the other right side, you can see remote start applications. This is a concept that is maybe familiar for people from colder countries because it was mainly facilitated using radio frequencies, so just remote controls, to maybe heat up your car because it's a freezing morning and it needs 10 minutes before you can actually go out of the garage and drive outside. But with the advancement in technologies, companies realized that this can happen over the internet. So what happens is you have an app on your phone and you're able to install a third-party thing in your car, one of the 3 options, and this thing can allow you to either unlock or even start your car using your phone. Now, these systems are usually referred to as keyless entry, and now they are becoming more popular even by the car manufacturers. But back in the day, the only option was third-party solutions, and they are still pretty big in the market. Now, what happens with these things, and which is really problematic, is that what you've essentially done is, in order to gain some comfort and the ability to have information extracted from your car, you are connecting to the car not only to your phone, but also many times to some internet-facing server. And this internet-facing server was developed by a company that what it had in mind is we're a small startup and we have to get this going as fast as possible, and maybe was not so much about security. But this is opening your car to the external world. Now, how many of you actually have one of these in your car? Okay, one person, two people in the audience, and which is not surprising to me, because as information security experts, you will be very hesitant before putting something that can remotely start your car in your car, right? But this solution is actually really widespread with keyless entry for the car sharing business. Car sharing is a growing trend in the automotive world because we are millennials and we don't like paying a lot for our things. And if I can pay just a little bit to use a car, then I will prefer that. And on top of that, you have companies managing fleets, and they will be very happy to not have to manage a huge closet with car keys and an inventory, and instead just be able to use applications on their phone. So this is actually much more widespread than you would expect. Now let's watch a small video about this.
Low energy technology. A virtual key is stored in the driver's smartphone. Smart access technology offers secure access by transmitting this information from the smartphone to the car, which recognizes the valid key and will unlock the car doors upon approach. With a valid virtual key inside the car, the smart access system gives authorization to start.
First, I want to thank Continental for uploading this video to YouTube. This looks nice, right? But I just took two media articles from last year. The first one is for the MyCar app that we saw before. A researcher named J-Max, maybe some of you know him, he presented it in Black Hat as well, found vulnerabilities for the My App application and device, which essentially resulted in him able to steal any MyCar connected app on the street, which is crucial. And also, the Car2Go company, which is a car sharing company, had more than 100 high-end cars stolen in Chicago. Now, I was noted that when I showed this presentation to a friend a few days ago that the thieves were caught, and apparently the issue was fraud and not cybersecurity, or at least the reported issue was fraud. But promise us when we say that in those solutions you can see vulnerabilities that will allow you to open the car using your phone or an outside connection. So all of these solutions make your car more vulnerable. And we've shown both for dongles and keyless entries and infotainment systems that they are Bluetooth connected. I call it the Bluetooth problem because on the other side of the screen we have vulnerabilities from last year. We have Bleeding Beat by Armis Labs, KNOB, which is was published by a university, SUTD, and Hell2Cup, which is a vulnerability found by Barak Caspi of Automotive. Those vulnerabilities could, and all of those are just from last year, and Bluetooth vulnerabilities, pre-authenticated, would allow you, using your phone or a Bluetooth dongle, to attack any device that is Bluetooth connected. Now, I have the technical slides for Hell2Cup. Maybe we'll show them at the end if we'll have time. I hope we will. But the problem with Bluetooth is that it is not the only problem. Our cars today are being connected with various new technologies. Some of them you know, NFC, Wi-Fi, USB, and some of them are new. Not all of them are listed here. But the new big one that is going to change our life is called V2X. Vehicle to X. X is a thing, and it's a family of new technologies, including vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to home, vehicle to person, and vehicle to vehicle. All of these technologies are supposed to assist cars to communicate with everything around them. This is a key technology for autonomous vehicles, but it's also very useful for the regular driver. Now, I have a video example by Automotive, which is a V2X manufacturer, chips manufacturer.
Public expects error-free autonomous vehicle operation. Sensors should operate flawlessly in any condition. V2X enhances the perception of other sensors at a fraction of the cost. Coordination, possible only with communication, improves traffic efficiency. Deadlock scenarios are avoided by synchronization between all vehicles, both autonomous and manned. Precious time is saved. Autotalks is the V2X chipset market pioneer.
I gave them like 2 seconds of advertisement because they make such cool videos, and I think they're worth it. This looks very good, and it will be very useful. This is about 10% of what V2X technology would enable us to do. It would also enable us to have less car accidents. If you as a driver get stuck on the side of the road, the V2X V2V safety protocol would publish to the other cars that you're around. So when they're approaching you, if they don't see you, all of the drivers will have an alert. V2X is used to help chain accidents. So if you do an emergency brake, instead of every driver seeing it with their eyes and understanding that there's could be an accident, a pop-up will alert them in their car, which is cool. But of course, for every new connected technology, we have the fear of new buffer overflowed payloads that could hack the car. And I don't want to focus on that, but for an example, V2X payload is SN1 based. And here I took a picture from the CVE list, searching for SN1 parsers, more than 120 CVEs for SN1 parsers, which is a lot. And since embedded developers have the tendency to develop their own parser each time, you can be sure that we will see new parsers with new vulnerabilities that will add up to this list. But since all of the data being sent around is the data the cars will use in decision making and should trust, what we'll see that having a fake V2X model, either by building one or hacking to the V2X model in my car, I as a hacker would be able to do a lot of bad things without memory corruptions or buffer overflows. For example, I could create false traffic. We saw in the video there was a vehicle stopping after receiving a V2X message. I could just spam those messages around and all of the vehicles will stop. That could be harassful. We could force emergency brakes. If autonomous cars are supposed to trust emergency brake messages and brake, we could make an autonomous car's brake. Hopefully the driver behind them doesn't have V2X technology, and they could crash. And we could generate false alarms. And this is only those two are only V2X safety messages, but there are so many more capabilities over this new technology that this would allow a hacker to do so many things that now are not capable via wireless technology over our cars. But they do thought about it. Those the RFCs for the V2X protocols are being published by the European Union, and they think a lot of security when building them. Every V2X module has to have a certificate, and every V2X message needs to be signed, which is nice unless you just hack your own V2X device and use its certificate. And they are thinking of the solution on how to handle this. I started to build the slide about it, but we decided we didn't have time. It was the proposed solution and the new vulnerabilities those solutions create. So this would have a lot of problems, of potential problems. Finishing with V2X, the third trend of the automotive industry that is easily competing with the first two ones are electrical vehicles. The charging that we know has developed from buying gasoline in a store to fuel stations, and now we see electrical charging stations being scattered around. More than 1 million of those stations are scattered only in China, which is the leading country of electrical charging. And I want to set up the terminology for electrical charging because this is an interesting technology. First, we have the EVSE, Electrical Vehicle Supply Equipment, which is this one. This is basically a charging station. On the other hand, we have the PEV, Plug-in Electric Vehicle, which is a vehicle with an ECU, electric car control unit, that is connected to the batteries and responsible for charging your car. So those get connected, and the electron starts to fill your tank and charge up the batteries. But you would maybe be surprised to hear that over this electrical connection, there is also a TCP/IP connection over power line communication. This is not a new technology. You are able to go today to the nearest electrical shop and buy PLC to Ethernet plugins, plug in your house and have Ethernet connection between computers that are connected to the same electrical source. But they did develop new technology specifically for automotive, a protocol of PLC called Home Plugged RIN-PHY AV, HPGP AV. I think it's the longest abbreviation by now of a protocol commonly used. And you might think, why do we need a TCP connection to charge our batteries? When you use regular batteries, you do not connect them to them by TCP. And we do need that for two main reasons. The first one is that we don't want our batteries to explode. And different batteries works differently. The car by itself will tell the EVSE what charging method does it support, AC or DC, what current it should use, and more information like that. You could start to think what you can do if you could do something to that connection. But the second reason we need it is because we're lazy and we don't want to pass our credit card after we've finished with the charging. We want to get back to our car and go away. So they said since they have to have this TCP connection to charge your car, they already added the automatic charging. So this ECU will save your credit card and the EVSE will send you the bill in the mail after you've finished the communication. You don't need to swipe or beep your card. And that could be useful. Now, this is the charging protocol stack, the V2G, vehicle to grid, which is not a part of V2X, surprisingly. This is the new protocol stack. You can see HPGP. The left-hand part is the electrical management protocols. They run first, decide how to charge the car, and then there's a UDP session sending STP data, which is a start of the encryption and certificate, and afterwards IP connection, TCP connection, TLS connection, and XML payloads being sent to our car. Of course, this could result in vulnerabilities because we know that XML parsers tend to have security vulnerabilities. Also, all of the new protocols that are supposed to be implemented could have header edge cases and other implementation bugs. But what's important for me that you understand is you are going to have a car, drive with it around, go up into a random device someone put on the street, which is a charging station, connect your car to it, via TCP, trust the information it sends you, and anyone could put devices on the street. They can go at night, pull up a normal charging station, place a new one, or just hack a charging station on the street. And since you trust this device, you could be vulnerable to attack over this connection. So also the protocols that we trust, the IPv6, TCP, TLS, they also have vulnerabilities. So I have here a list from last month, a group of vulnerabilities published by Armis Labs called Urgent 11. Those are RCE vulnerabilities in the TCP/IP stack of VxWorks. VxWorks is a real-time operation system commonly used for embedded devices, also in the automotive world. And basically, since the way you decide if you trust the EVSEs by using TLS, using any of those vulnerabilities on your car would result in code execution against you, which is bad. Since the TCP and IP, all of them are prior to the TLS connection, you wouldn't be safe because of the encryption or because of the certificate. And this is a very, very big threat. I just think about it. You come, you plug your car, and then an attacker attacks you over the electricity. It looks something like this. A malicious EVSE sends you an electrical connection, sends you data over this connection, and then your vehicle is gone. And you can think, what could a hacker do with after hacking your battery ECU? So first, they can charge your credit card and not your car. This is a pun. It's a wordplay. Since this ECU is responsible for the billing at the end, for making sure that the amount of energy you got is equivalent to the amount of money you have to pay. If this ECU is hacked, then the EVSE could charge you for how much it wants, and nothing will stop him. And this is bad because this way they can steal money, and we like our money. The other thing is that hacking the ECU, the battery ECU, it is possible to hack other components inside your car. All of the ECUs are connected, either by CAN bus or Ethernet or more, and a hacker could possibly hack your engine or your brakes or any other car control component, and that's a bad thing. Using a malicious EVSE, you could crash any car that is being connected to it 1 hour after it left. We're going to the last part of our presentation, and I'm passing the remote to Yonatan.
Yeah, okay, so Lior has just described a scenario in which an attacker needs physical access to a charging station in order to do bad things. But what if all of these charging stations are connected somehow to centralized management? Now, this is very reasonable because we like connecting things in the 21st century, or at least in the second decade of the 21st century. And these EVSEs, they need to interact with you somehow. So if they want to send you the billing email, they have to be connected to the internet somehow. And if you want to update them with new rates, they need to be connected to the internet somehow. You get the cause. Now, once all these things are connected to clouds that are quite specific to vehicles, because that's what they're charging, they are susceptible to remote attacks. It's not only just moving around physically in the country and trying to attack EVSEs, but now if I, for example, leverage the vulnerability by reverse engineering the application used to communicate with this cloud for management, for the technician, whatever it may be, and I was able to somehow manipulate the cloud to run my own code on one of these EVSEs, then probably I can run my own code on many of these EVSEs. Now, the scenario here gets a little bit more complicated, but we're trying to portray a way or new ways through which attackers can reach your car in manners that maybe the manufacturers didn't even think about. So this TCP/IP connection maybe is not the thing that gets the most attention in the car, like your infotainment system, that by now everyone knows that infotainment systems are connected and are susceptible to attacks. Now, not only EVSEs are connected to centralized management, but also cars. So in the beginning of the presentation, we've showed how since about 2015, a lot of cars began being connected to the internet. And in fact, if you go to Europe, over 50% of the cars currently sold in Europe come bundled with internet connection to the cloud. Now, this is not like 2015, only for your infotainment needs, but this actually connects critical ECUs within the car to the internet. Now, why would I do that? Because I am a car manufacturer, and I want to know, for example, if there are issues in your car. I want to know if any of the ECUs is malfunctioning. I don't have to wait for you to go to the garage once a year, and then maybe the garage person reports back to me as the manufacturer, maybe he does not. I can collect the telemetries, and I can send them to myself and process them. And maybe, as a manufacturer, I can use this to realize if my specific model has issues. Maybe I can use it to even somehow fix these issues, which we'll refer to in a moment. So now you know that cars nowadays connect to the internet, and they don't only use it to stream your songs over Spotify, but actually to do some quite serious things. Now, unfortunately, we cannot tell you about very sassy things that we found, but instead we'll have a little bit of imagination and an activity here to imagine what can a hacker do with access or manipulation of the vehicle cloud. So, for example, you have some normal stuff. You have the client's private information, which is quite a big deal nowadays with GDPR and new regulations in the market. And consumers are very concerned about this, but it's quite normal. You have credit cards, which already starts being quite a larger deal. And maybe you have OEM secrets. So, for example, some secret keys used in the car manufacturing process. I don't know. But these things are not extremely unique to the vehicle industry. These things are things that you can pretty much find in other IT clouds for applications, for example. They have secrets, they have private information, many times they're able to charge you for some things. So this is not very automotive specific. What is more automotive specific and then a little more juicy is, first of all, your GPS coordinates. Some people, and the richer you are, the more problematic it is for you, usually. The extremely rich people are the most concerned for the ability to track them. The GPS coordinate is something that is measured by your car and often communicated to the backend of the manufacturer for the sake of decision making. So, for example, I have to know in the very basic manner to which specific server is your car supposed to connect. And this is according to your car's location. This is the most basic thing that you can do with it, but it's also useful for a lot of other things. And this is why it's often communicated. More juicy stuff that I can do is that manufacturers now offer us, the consumers, these same remote functions that were priorly offered by third-party vendors. They understand that forcing, or not really forcing, but encouraging people to install third-party equipment in their cars because these features are not available by OEMs is, to say the least, problematic. And also, they want to gain money because they want to sell as many cars. That's essentially what they're doing here. So remote unlock features are now official features of the car clouds. So this is also something that if I'm able to conduct an identity theft on a car cloud, which is not something unheard of in most cloud applications, right? You can hear about vulnerabilities like this all the time. Then perhaps I can gather information about the location of the car, or I can even unlock it remotely, which the more expensive the car, the more problematic it is. And then we can think about a little bit of futuristic stuff. This is an exercise I did with myself about maybe next generation, so the 2025 sci-fi cars. But when you think about Uber and about shared transportation, this is very likely to be one of the first cars that convert to being autonomous. Because it is much easier that when you open Uber and order a cab, what gets to you is not a human driver that can protest and say that he's not earning enough, but rather just a car. and you don't care about the car's rights. You only care about drivers' rights. So this is very useful for companies like Uber, like Lyft, like Grab, and perhaps sometimes in the future, national public transportation companies, bus industry. And when you order an Uber, there is going to be, or there has to be, some kind of centralized management that basically takes the autonomous taxi and tells it, okay, this is where you have to go now. Now, if this is taken over, we're in problem. Another thing that I could think of is the next generation of police enforcement. So perhaps some governments could collect legal information. Of course, this will still be debated in the high courts of the EU about privacy versus the ability to protect the citizens. But perhaps they can collect information, and with vehicle-to-vehicle communication that will involve sending information to the cloud as well, they could collect this information, process it, and perhaps decide that a specific car now needs to stop. And if they are given access to the cars remotely, even slide access, even for just putting on some notifications or stuff like that, this is also a futuristic possibility with the vehicle cloud. And with that, I'll leave your imagination to it because the cloud is the limit here. Now, a word about over-the-air that was mentioned in the previous slide, but I ignored it. Most modern cars are connected to the internet. And one of the most major things that the OEMs want to do with this is the ability to update your ECUs remotely. Now, why do they need to do that? Because they have bugs, because they want to improve their features, because maybe they want to install some features that didn't exist before, because maybe there are security vulnerabilities that they want to patch. And up until now, all of these things required you to go and take your car to the garage and the technician to flash your ECUs over the OBD port that we've discussed. But with over-the-air updates, the manufacturers can facilitate this to update your ECUs remotely. And this is a huge advantage for car manufacturers. Now, the problem with this is if I'm able to force the over-the-air mechanism to deliver my own stuff, I can own a hell lot of vehicles at once. And this will probably look like this. An attacker has compromised the vehicle cloud and is able to craft a malicious update. The update is delivered to the cars, multiple cars now. Now it's not just attacking a single car over Bluetooth. And the next morning, bam, you wake up, and the very least that can happen to your car is some kind of low criticality vulnerability that is just popping up message on your screen. Now, this may not risk your life, but is sure to cause a lot of pain and financial damage to the car manufacturers and a lot of annoyance for the users. And this is to say the very least. Of course, if I'm able to flash other ECUs, then I can do a whole lot more damage massively. So we spoke a lot about a lot of bad things that can happen. But we'd like to end with kind of a smile on our faces and look a little bit on the bright side. And the bright side is that OEMs invest so much effort in trying to make their products as secure as they can. I cannot express how much budget is used to make sure that they hire the best security consultancy services that they have. And it's also nice for us, not to say that we're the best, but it pays the bills. And also, what's really nice is that connected autonomous cars would be really awesome. This is going to change our lives, and I think it's for the good. It will take a while to adapt to it, and of course, people will always still want to drive, but this is going to change our lives and the way we interact with the world. I think not any less than how smartphones changed our lives. Okay, Lior, do you want to do this?
To summarize, if you just enter the room, so what we talked about are the risks of everything being connected, the new attack vectors coming up, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, NFC, V2X, PLC, and more. There are many new technologies that we haven't had time to discuss. And the opportunities that we talked about in the end, there's going to be less accidents and life-changing technologies. And as a big thing, this is for the good. Now, you can ask us anything, and we'll see the questions soon. I see we have 15 minutes, so we can do two things. We can do the questions, or we could speak about the head-to-cup vulnerability technological explanation, tech explanation. It would take about 9 minutes.
So Lior and Yonatan wanted to do something a little bit different, give you two options. Either talk about
And then, we can have
or ask
15 minutes of questions, or a tech dive to head-to-cup, and 6 minutes of
Shall we
questions.
get the audience to vote?
Yeah, let's
Yes.
vote.
Okay,
But
so
raise your hands, please.
Who would like to have the tech dive? Okay.
Okay, so that is happening, Lior.
Yeah, that
I
is
think
happening.
that's
That's
the
good.
majority, yep.
So we are afraid to just accidentally press space. So there's a blank slide. And then we go into the head-to-cup vulnerability. It was discovered in 2018 by Barak Caspi of Automotive. Barak Caspi is what you call in Hebrew a scary cannon, totach mafrid. It means he's really good at vulnerability research. And he found a state machine bug in Blue SDK L2CAP implementation. Blue SDK is a provider of Bluetooth stacks for embedded companies, development companies, which is used by more than 100 million devices globally. Part of them are autonomous ECU, not autonomous, automotive ECUs, but not all of them. It's also other IoT devices around the world. And here you can see the Bluetooth stack. There are many protocols inside it. I will only dive into what we need to know to understand the vulnerability. But what we need to know is that L2CAP is being used somehow like the IP of Bluetooth. It passes messages coming inside. It's open Bluetooth channels, which I'll talk about the next slide. And over it, there are some other protocols, specifically SDP, which we'll show in a little bit. So how L2CAP works? First, as a device, you connect to the Bluetooth service. You connect by sending an L2CAP connect message with the PSM protocol ID you wish to connect to. So each Bluetooth station has few services, and you need to specify to which service do you wish to connect. Specifically, PSM1 is the SDP. And then the station replies with an L2CAP connect response with an ID, channel identifier. It's something like a port in TCP IP. The station opens a new channel, this time channel 41 hex. This is a random number that we chose. And over this connection, we will use this channel number every time we wish to send a message to the upper layer that we chose, specifically 1. And after we receive the DCID, the channel ID we need to communicate, we as the device are able to send configuration requests using the DCID number that we received. We can configure parameters of the channel. For example, we can configure the MTU, the timeout, and more parameters. What we need to know to understand this vulnerability is that the minimal Bluetooth MTU is 48. This is taken from the Bluetooth specification version 3, saying all L2CAP implementations shall support a minimum MTU of 48, which is exactly what I said here. This is the pseudocode from reverse engineering the L2CAP configuration for MTU. So what you can see is that we get a packet, data ether being sent to it. This is code of the Blue SDK. So on the station, it saves the MTU, save this to the channel global object, and then checks if the size, the MTU that we require the channel to change to is smaller than the minimum. If it's smaller, then the channel is being set to invalid. So how will it look? They'll do the connect request, get a DCID, and then if we send a valid MTU like hex 200 with the DCID we just got, the MTU will be changed, and we will get a success message. On the other hand, if we will send an invalid MTU size configuration request, like hex 10, the channel will be set to invalid, so valid no, and the MTU will be saved in the channel object, but for an invalid channel, we could not send messages over it, and that's a problem. But the red flag we see here is that the value stored on line 4 and only then is checked on line 5. So if we could somehow restore the channel to be valid, what will happen? What we do is send a configuration request, changing the MTU to 20. 20 is an invalid number because it's lower than 48. Then the channel is being invalid and the value 20 is being saved. Afterwards, we set a configuration request again for another parameter called flash timeout and change the timeout number to a different number. In the code, since this command was successful, the channel is being set to be valid at the end. And now what we get is a valid channel with an MTU lower than 48. That, of course, could cause a problem. Because L2CAP is responsible, the L2CAP, the protocol implementation, is responsible for setting the channel MTU for the upper layers trust L2CAP to do it correctly. And if we see the upper layer SDP, it's doing some fragmentation. It takes the value of the MTU from the L2CAP layer, from the global channel objects that we saw, this here, MTU. It subtracts 9 out of it. This is the SDP header size, and saves it into a variable called available size for fragment. This is basically the parameter that will be copied after a few functions into memcopy, copying our information into a buffer. So if our MTU is 48 minus 9, we get 39, which is an okay size because the buffer it's being copied into is bigger than 39. But if the MTU supplied to SDP is lower than 9, for example, 8, then the available size for fragment will cause an integer overflow, resulting in a FFFF size, which is much bigger than the buffer that the data attributes of SDP are being stored into. And what we get is we set and low MTU that would result in an integer overflow, causing a buffer overflow, and there are about 1 hour of presentation slides explaining what we do next to exploit this in Barak's research. You can find most of them on the website of Automotive. We have the full report of the L2CAP vulnerability. But eventually what we get is profit, being able to hack any device that is using Blue SDK. Of course, this vulnerability was disclosed. You can see the CVE in our presentation where I talked about it before. And now we have time for questions.
Okay, great. Before I throw it to the audience, I usually throw it to the audience first, but this time on Slido we have seriously upvoted question, 36 votes. I've never
Wow.
seen
36 votes?
Yeah, I've never seen such a high number, and the second one is 34 votes. So I think they deserve to be answered first.
Wow.
Yeah. So, 38.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, you guys get awards for getting such a upvoted question.
Do you want to take the first one?
Can you take the first two?
I'll take the second.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so
That is yours.
as Israelis, we say yes to anything that any other external company that is a potential client asks us if we can do. So we don't only do vulnerability research, but we don't also do consulting. And as such, I've been consulting 2 car manufacturers exactly on this. So there is a lot of effort on secure design. There are dedicated security architects for big projects, both for the car and for the backend systems. And the answer to this question is very much yes.
Yes, and I would add that in Automotive we have a team of, I think, more than 12 security architectures doing this 100% of the time. And we said in the presentation that all of the manufacturers are investing a lot into securing their cars. So they do work very hard on it. The second question is, I want to hack EV chargers by being zapped with 120 k volt. Excuse me, please advise. I had the same feeling. when we conducted the similar research. And what you find out is you can buy development boards of HPGP, and every EV charger has a connection bypassing the electrical SCARY connection that you can plug into the development boards. They're pretty expensive. It's like $500 each, but you can buy them online. You just order them and try to use them. It could be a little hard to set up, to build a setup, but it is possible. There are two lines called CP and PP. You connect them and hopefully everything will work.
You have to know hardware to do that.
Yeah, but you get the manual, so after like 2 weeks, it will probably work.
Yeah, and also, is this someone from the audience? Because this definitely is worth. Oh, yeah. But you already got swag. This is
You deserve one.
Yeah, this is definitely worth swag.
The previous gentleman was Liang. Who was that? The one who had.
Who was the first question?
Whose question had 41 votes.
I have your gift here.
We have double swag.
The name is Liang.
Probably from home. So Liam, if you see us, hop here to Singapore or send an email or something, and we will get the swag delivered to you.
So before we go to the next question from on the slide, I want to throw it open to the floor. Any questions from the floor? Yes, sir. Where's the other mic?
Thanks. It's about zoom in on the first question that they made you, that as Israeli, of course, you answer, yes, I can do it. From a practical perspective, I take the example of SCADA and ICS. Those guys, they don't understand security. You train them on secure programming, and so their mindset is totally wrong, and it takes years and years. But on my humble opinion, there will never be a few of them, of the engineers, will ever be able to switch their mindset. So what has been your experience in this? Because it's a business, the one of the cars that is so huge and big. And as far as I can see it, or they started your clients to hire new engineers and youngers and with a different mindset, or trying and forcing the mindset of a 40, 50 years old engineer is not that easy at all. How is it?
Yeah, so let me take that. So you're right. These are giants, and as part of our job as security consultants, we are actually bureaucracy fighters. And a lot of what our top management does is create the understanding of the importance within the different departments of the companies with which we work. Okay, so this is a really important part of what we do, and we do that. And we help them communicate better between the company, between the different departments of the company, because we, in the first slide presenting Automotive, said end-to-end testing. Now, this is sometimes just a buzzword, but for us, we are really trying to portray scenarios that are taken from the car to the back end, from the phone or to the phone, and to anything that is related. And this requires some cooperation, both between the OEMs and themselves, the different departments, that they are now working really hard to create, and their tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, because we didn't mention that, but most of the automotive products and ECUs are not made directly by the car manufacturers, but rather by large companies like Bosch, Continental, Lior, all of these giants. So it's definitely a struggle, but it's improving so much. They are already on board. At least the major players in this market are already on board.
Have you heard anything positive about the certificate management for V2X? Because the early specifications I've seen have government organizations managing these certificates, and since they can't manage their own X509 certificates for their websites, this is both a great opportunity and terrifying.
Yes. So they do plan the OEMs to manage the certificates. So they thought about giving the big OEMs that supply you with the car also to supply you with the certificate, which is a okay thing. I think they can do it because they have more incentive to do it than the government, because if there will be a problem with their cars, they're the ones that will suffer. What they do plan to do, and because we have time, a minute, have time to talk about it, they plan to have the cars report suspected liars of V2X. So if a car is sending a message using a certificate saying that there's an emergency brake and the radar or the camera does not see, your car is supposed to report the certificate to the server. And if enough cars report, this would result in the revoke of the certificate, and then you won't be able to send V2X messages. The new vulnerabilities it creates is that having enough fake models, you could kick other people out. You would just report them to the servers, and then the V2X devices would stop working, which could be a bad thing. And all of the OEMs are not that sure of how to create such a reporting system because it's a lot of work for a very niche vulnerability. The V2X protocol stack is the same protocol stack. They use the same protocols, but the payload in the end is a bit different. So it's SN1 messages. They make the structure of the payload. And then if your car supports the payload being published over there, then it could talk to your house. But if you're they have the same certificates and the same mechanism, and then what could happen is the small V2X suppliers of V2I equipment should handle the certificates as well. They're not sure how they'll do that yet, but they're still developing this technology.
There's a good point here that it requires cooperation between the different manufacturers that are essentially competitors. So they're going to have to somehow sit in the same committees, and they have been. So there's progress there, and they're trying to take care of this, and they have really good men on board that have been involved in such efforts.
Okay, I'm going to squeeze in one question, if I may.
Yeah, of
I
course.
wanted to ask that, if I could. You had a slide about Bluetooth, about the attack. You had one slide listing all the attack
of course.
vectors, and then
That's it
Bluetooth,
anyway.
Wi-Fi, NFC, V2X, and then you had one slide specifically on Bluetooth. What about cellular? Have you looked at the particular vulnerabilities in cellular that would?
Some NDA, so cannot speak about them, but I think there are some things available online. And what more I will say is that usually the modems that are in the chips used by car manufacturers are not unique. So the research is conducted on these things for other industries as well, and you can look into that if it's interesting for you.
All right. With that, I think. All right, one last question, because it is coffee break time.
Yeah, we
Last
are
question.
2-minute overtime.
Yeah, I don't know if there was at the beginning of your slides because I arrived 5 minutes after 10. But I'm speaking about the seamless car like BMW. So Elena, she bought one.
Autonomous cars.
It has got a seat who doesn't say it's seamless. What about the scenarios of mobile remote attacks through this seamless thing as an actor, as an entry point?
What do you mean by seamless?
She never bought a SIM card, but she has.
That are not connected.
It's a virtual SIM into the BMW.
A virtual SIM is not seamless. It's a SIM.
Oh.
It exists in the car. It is configured by the network, and it's quite similar in terms of after it's configured, quite similar to SIM cards. I guess our colleague here, who is a mobile expert, maybe can tell you more about it.
So there should not be any kind of differences as attacking us as a real
Maybe
SIM
in the
card.
configuration protocol, but
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that, do you have a favorite question that you want to give some swag to?
I like your question.
Oh, wow. Right. Oh, thank you.
Yes, but I would like to give one for everyone who asks a question because I have more.
This one,
And
here.
if you like the presentations, then tell me, and then I will give you another one. I have three
So
more.
with that, I would like to invite everybody to give a big round of applause to Lior and Yonatan for the